What's seen in shadow is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. In our world full of color and complexities, there's something comforting about black and white, clear answers, right and wrong, purity. But true purity means no gray, no matter the cost. And few explore that deeply philosophical idea better than Knife Kid and the Batman at Home. Two monochromatic manifestations of suffering born from isolated children trying to conserve their collapsing realities. But what's always fascinated me is how these two chase purity in opposite directions. The Batter reduces everything to a pristine nothingness until only black remains, while Omori rewrites the story, painting over a dark truth until his canvas burns white. So that raises today's curious question. If the Batter were dropped into Omori's colorful world of headspace, would his methods purify it to darkness? Or could its creator catch him red-handed? Alright, before we start our battle of the unstoppable crash out versus the immovable depression, let's make one thing very clear. Today, we're comparing the Batter versus Omori, not the Batter versus Sunny. If this baseball-looking cryptid came pounding on the door of a malnourished 16-year-old playing pretend with his imaginary friends, yeah, Lil Bro's obviously getting his kneecaps purified. But looking at the fight this way misses the point of our question entirely. Yes, Omori, both the game and character, are imaginary. All a dream inside the mind of one child named Sunny. But simply dismissing the fantasy world as not real or unimportant ignores the most central ideas of Omori. A game where your emotions will shape the world, literally and metaphorically. Every spooky, surreal moment in this notoriously spooky, surreal game intentionally blurs the line between Sunny's inner world and outer life. Characters like the mysterious stranger or Ghost Mari follow Sunny into his fictional world to paint an intentionally paranormal vibe. And even if you don't think anything about Omori's journey is inherently supernatural, chalking it all up to the mind playing tricks, by trying to ignore the game's mother-inspired JRPG framing, where battles, level ups, and yes, power scaling are important narrative devices used to tell the story, means losing out on 99% of what makes the game so special. In honesty, if your whole argument for avoiding Omori scaling is that he's make-believe, then you might as well say the Batter solos fiction by beating up your favorite author. So today, we're assuming the Batter is dropped into a literal version of Headspace. Everything is real, and the only way out is through Omori. Got it? Good. Because the best place to start with such a question is by explaining the ultimate French purifying machine himself. Well, the other ultimate French purifying machine himself. Off is often considered one of the earliest and greatest meta-narrative indie RPGs of all time. Without it, projects like Undertale, One Shot, and even Omori likely would have struggled to find such wild success. Our story's protagonist, the Batter, is a pale entity born from the imagination of a child named Hugo. From the moment he exists, he innately understood his sacred mission: purify the world of Off. With help from a blackened soul named the Puppeteer or Player, the Batter travels across 4 zone maps under the guidance of a strange talking cat. His task starts simple: put the spooky specters to rest. But when he meets Dedan, an envoy of the Queen who's just a little too mean towards his workers, something snaps. To the Batter, someone like Dedan is no better than a specter. And knowing how he felt about those, this leads to an inevitable confrontation. Dedan's fight matters because he's the first of 4 zone guardians. These guardians are described as living engines who channel the infinite power of the sun to literally shape their zones into existence. So, if one of these engines were to be removed, the consequences would be disastrous. Not one to be dissuaded though, the batter follows his sacred convictions, giving each guardian a personal introduction to his iron judgment before confronting the queen, crushing the helpless child Hugo, and reaching the off switch. Too late to turn back now, we give a final input, ending this world fading into darkness. Even following my basic rundown of the batter's story, it should seem only logical that the batter, who destroyed everything, should scale above the 4 zone guardians. And while that's true, for many years after release, fans would endlessly argue about this scaling due to one detail. How big were the zones of off? Because the original freeware version of the game was written in French, the nuance of a translated word like world can get pretty contentious. It could mean anything from society to planets, or maybe even the universe. But just when all hope for an easy answer seemed lost, the GigaChad developer himself, Mortis Ghost, descended from the heavens to casually end a decade-long debate through Off's 15th anniversary livestream. Seriously, I can't stress enough what an absolute baller he was for this. During that one 4-hour-long livestream, which I'll reference a lot here, Mortis Ghost answered basically any question a die-hard Off fan would want to know. And, I kid you not, he's even weighed in on the Omori vs. Batter discussion himself. But I'll tell you what he thought about it a bit later. For now, let's focus on his answer to that first question. Mortis Ghost described the zones by saying, zones are zones, not planets, equating them to something like a continent or country. So what does that mean for off scaling? Well, each zone guardian shapes the infinite power of the sun to maintain their zone. So, depending on how literally you take that, the required energy ranges from 1 to 100 petatons of TNT, somewhere between the minimum to destroy a continent versus the entire output of the sun's energy per second. Although, a third, more popular scale for the batter uses neither of these, opting instead to use Einstein's famous E=mc² equation. For those who aren't ready to confront the PTSD of high school physics though, this formula just says that energy can be directly converted to mass using this c² part. Now, whether or not the Guardians are directly turning solar energy into matter, or if they're just like Jedi lifting giant land masses into the sky with sunlight, is kinda unclear. But giving them the benefit of the doubt, they would need to be shaping planetary levels of energy to pull this off. And that general range is the most consistent place for the characters of Off to be. In fact, it's directly supported by Mortis Ghost himself, in a moment so wild I couldn't even make it up. When asked, how do you measure the batter's power in the real world, this man, without hesitation, whipped out the DBZ Scouter maneuver and proceeded to give his goat a cannon power level. This is real! This happened! Someone call Toby Fox, no, get every indie dev on the Gaster group chat. If you all did this, my job would be so much easier. Anyways, while I'm not here to say Mortis Ghost has any secret control over Dragon Ball lore, we do know he likes the series. He planned to give Hugo forehead dots like Goku's friend Krillin, and some of the batter's bats are even named after famous mangaka. So, if Mortis Ghost knows exactly what a power level is, and gave us a specific number to reflect how strong he intended the batter to be, I don't see why we shouldn't use it. And that number, 4,000, doesn't seem random either, as only one Dragon Ball character ever got that exact reading, Nappa. Yes, comments section, the batter unironically got the legendary Madara equals Nappa statement before Madara did. The funniest part about this power level though is that it actually fits the game's scaling. Dragon Ball characters with power levels around 200 were casual moonbusters. Raditz at 1500 said those same attacks barely singed his leg hairs. Then Nappa at 4000 bullied a half dozen characters stronger than Raditz all at once. 4000 is also kinda flirting with those memed over 9000 numbers, which are repeatedly stated in official sources to be outright planetary, which all lines up with the higher end of Off's interpretations. And yet, that still barely touches on the batter's biggest advantage: you, the puppeteer. Unlike most RPG protagonists, the batter is a meta-aware entity. He acknowledges the player directly and willingly hands you complete control over his body, relying on our power to save and load reality through the red boxes to gain infinite redos, along with using our knowledge to solve puzzles. Meaning, even if the batter only had a 1% chance of victory against someone like Nappa, your cosmic sweaty gamer persistence turns that into a guaranteed victory before ever even adding on the add-ons. A group of sentient extensions fused into the batter himself, who function like permanent party members. If he's allowed to smuggle them into a typical 1v1, you're now basically fighting 4 Nappa tier entities controlled by one godlike presence above the story who can rewrite failure itself. From there, if you really wanted to highball the batter, I suppose you could argue star level, as the queen and her minions draw vague power from the sun. It's not super concrete, but the implication is there for anyone bold enough to run with courage. With 3 zones down though and a goal for home base, is the batter actually strong enough to strike out Headspace? Surprisingly, that answer is less complicated. Unlike Off's grounded post-apocalyptic pseudo-Earth, Headspace is a metaphysical dreamscape existing entirely in the mind palace of one teenage boy. And teenage boys, well, they're not exactly known for their small imagination. In the beginning, there were only 2, the dreamer and his room. One day, the dreamer grew wary and created a door to countless worlds. This curiosity led him to a realm of darkness and chaos. Fearing such a place, he formed benevolent entities to protect him, then layered world after world atop that bottomless darkness, sealing it beneath the weight of his dreams. But it never vanished. The knowledge that truth and reality could only be buried, yet never escaped, made the dreamer realize he was too powerful to coexist with his own creations. So, the dreamer abandoned his identity and chose to forget himself, taking on a new name. That name was Omori. Unlike the batter made solely to push his world forward, Omori was created to prevent his world from ever moving at all. It's that black and white dichotomy coming full circle. One purifies by progress, the other by stasis. However, due to the nature of Omori, the scale of reality we're talking about controlling here is much more shockingly grand. The main playable area of Headspace alone spans entire galaxies, with a small region called Otherworld casually containing an entire solar system made from PNGs of our real-world planets. Then, as the backstory tells us, the Dreamer created many more worlds that he planted atop the chaotic darkness, like White Space, Red Space, and the Dark World itself called Black Space. Essentially, imagine turning Off's 4 continents into whole galaxy-spanning universes. That is Omori's Headspace. Now, fortunately for the batter, almost no one in Omori can actually affect Headspace on the same sort of scale as the Zone Guardians do in Off. Most characters don't even realize other dimensions exist. Only a handful of endgame bosses can approach the kind of destructive presence needed to challenge the batter. Expanded Pluto, for example, is plainly called the strongest planet in the universe, soaring through galaxies and destroying whatever stands in his path. But even then, Off's stronger author statements make Pluto's vague planetary scaling seem shaky at best. Frankly, with enough time and the puppeteer by his side, I imagine the batter could likely purify even Headspace's heaviest hitters, like Perfect Heart or Space Ex-Husband. But today's video wasn't titled, "Can the batter beat all of Headspace's local jobbers?" And the real problem he's going to face is when Omori realizes some ghoulish home-running abomination is terrorizing his neighborhood. Unlike nearly every other Headspace resident, Omori is equal parts creation and creator. He exists in the mind of a child as a fictional character, but is also Sunny's blank slate, a vessel representing the boy who dreamed the world. And of course, like all edgy teenagers do, Sunny made his self-insert Omori absurdly powerful. In gameplay terms, Omori is the most special character. He's the only one who can reach Tier 3 emotions, the game's power-up mechanic, and he's the only party member who isn't allowed to die. If Omori's HP hits 0, it's an instant game over. Fortunately though, dropping Omori is a harder challenge than it seems. As the first time it happens in any battle, he won't succumb. He endures, gaining an extra turn. Again, Omori is so special because he is the Dreamer, not just a character, but a version of Sunny playing oblivious to the truth. But just like the batter facing down to dawn, the second Sunny's mind drifts towards darkness, Omori will drop this act quick, and channel the same power that created Headspace in the first place. An easy example is the resets. Anytime Sunny edges too close to the truth, like with Basil in the photo album, Omori just restarts Headspace. Memories wiped, worlds rearranged, no big off switch or player intervention needed, just a single thought, then gone at a whim. This power becomes even clearer in the Sunny route, where, if Sunny confronts his expectations, loneliness, and fear, putting pure black and white faith in a world that shines with true depth and color, Omori, as the living embodiment of Sunny's repression, a nihilistic fear of trust, immediately has to lock in to put an end to that hope-maxing nonsense. And memoryless mask dropped, Omori fights Sunny directly, with no self-imposed gameplay limitation to stop him. In this state, Omori is the strongest force of the game. His will not succumb mechanic becomes literal immortality. He truly can't die through conventional means, something confirmed by the stranger. And as the Dreamer, Omori is also a reality warper of the highest order. He can just make things. His friends, monsters, environments, entire dimensions, all formed at a whim. Those red hands dragging people into black space? His creation. The layers of Headspace and every world stacked between them. It's all him. He made it all on a scale the batter has never been up against before. Honestly though, the idea of a reality warping child rivaling the batter probably shouldn't shock most Off fans, since Hugo, a child much like Sunny, not only created the batter, but is canonically far stronger than him as well. His maxed out 9999 competence points, which serve as Off's magic stat, dwarf the batter's own stats entirely. The only reason Hugo doesn't obliterate the batter instantly is simple. He doesn't want to. Mortis Ghost has confirmed that Hugo believed in the batter until the very end. To Hugo, watching his friends, the Guardians, all turn into miserable dictators, while his mother figure, the Queen, grew too busy to care for him, made Hugo's life unbearable. The batter wasn't Hugo's repression, he was hope. A father, a superhero, a savior who could end the suffering. As the batter himself said to the Queen, lost in preparing the birthday party, you forget who it was for. So even though both the batter and Omori embody a kind of nihilism manifest, the batter is trapped as a creation, with purpose perverted, while Omori is Sunny, his exact equal. a shadow of every doubt and insecurity looming over headspace. This leaves the batter with only one string of hope left to pull on: the puppeteer, his player. And surprisingly, with a player behind the wheel, many of Omori's advantages can be somewhat weaved. The batter can't be sent to black space jail if we just load a save, and obviously Omori couldn't end him outright because we'll just bring him back with the same power. But we can't really make the batter stronger. So even with his 4 add-ons, he's still fighting a debatably universe-busting Omori, plus an infinite army of summoned friend clones, who are all stronger than the planet-punching Pluto. It's like some sort of Dark Souls boss for the batter, except even if he wins, the boss would just respawn too. But does that mean Omori versus the batter is a truly endless yin-yang stalemate with no hopeful resolution? Not quite. Unlike Sunny and Omori, whose story is built on trust and forgiveness, the batter and his puppeteer tell a story of obsession and blind loyalty. This relationship reaches its tipping point in Off's final choice. Right before you hit the off switch, the judge, that talking cat who's been guiding you along with his mysterious wisdom, appears at World's End to stop you. At this point, the judge will not address the batter, but rather you, the person behind the screen. He asks if you're satisfied with what the batter has done, with all he's destroyed, and whether you'll blindly follow his sacred mission all the way to annihilation. Here, you're given a choice: side with the batter or the judge. If you choose the batter, nothing changes. Even though this route features the canon final boss, the judge falls effortlessly. Your power enables the batter's obsession, completes his mission, and plunges the world into darkness. But if you side with the judge, everything flips. For the first time, the batter is shown as he truly is, a monstrous figure known as the Bad Batter. However, the judge, representing truth and justice, remains unchanged. With your help, he slays the batter and warrants the faintest hope for a happy ending to this otherwise bleak game. This special ending proves something very crucial. The batter's connection to the player is fragile. More fragile than almost any fourth wall breaking character out there. The puppeteer can fully abandon him. And if the puppeteer leaves him, the batter becomes nothing but a monster. An empty shell without the meta power that makes him unstoppable. Now, of course, Omori would never trust some fourth wall breaking doofus for the win. It goes against everything he is. The player is antithetical to his very existence. But through the light of Sunny and his willingness to put faith in others, there is a path forward. Omori, the Shadow, could follow his lead, creating a new blank canvas like he did long ago to serve the role of player. At that point, our hypothetical player is left to choose between eternity fighting an undefeatable Omori or rejecting oblivion entirely, siding with the sun and sending the batter back to white. And that, my dear viewer, is exactly why Mortis Ghost himself said Omori would win, even though he's never played the game. The logic is just that simple. Truly, Omori is the one who beats off. And that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.